Okay, hello everyone. Welcome to the Q&A and critique number 68. It is currently now 2015 UTC. I hear the world has changed its time zones, so now we're currently running at 1500 Eastern Standard Time instead of Central Standard Time. And today we're going to be doing a live stream digital art and questions and answers event here in the Q&A and critique Discord channel of the Boi Addons Discord server. Hey, Let's Boi Addons edition. I'm here with some very good friends of mine that I'm very happy to see again. We've got Marty Fouts, who's been an excellent character that I've admired and has joined me in the Q&As a while ago. So I'm very honored to have you here today. I'm also here with a good friend, Kinda Drunk, and Plebes. Plebes has been doing some really amazing November art prompts with a very, very clever and creative answer to the prompts using plants. And he's been using geometry nodes for that later. So maybe, Plebes, I'll ask you about this, about your work later. But today we have a chock-a-block topic. So today's topic is based on my work for the Painterly project of the Android repair shop by DG Unknown. This particular step of the process is setting up the new characters for the next episode. Just last week we published the last episode, so this week I'll be working on finishing up the new assets, including the new neighborhood of the city, and not one but two new characters. But today we're going to be taking some shortcuts and using Adobe Mixamo Rigs as a base rig to create two separate rigs. One of them will be a mocap rig, which is based on the Mixamo Animations and base rigs. And then from that, we'll be using the Mixamo add-on to create a control rig. And then we're going to discuss the issues of using a control rig with a shadow rig or the deform rig and trying to work around it so that we can have a selective motion capture rig with custom personalized animation controls. So there's a lot to do for 1 hour, so let's get right onto it. Are you guys ready? And let's go.
Yeah.
All right. So since this is a live Q&A and critique, if you have questions or you'd like me to clarify some of the steps, just open up the mic or write into the chat and I'll try be pending on what's happening so that we can see what's going on. And I can go in deeper as well. Hopefully there won't be too many rabbit holes, but if there are questions, just let me know. And let's begin. So first things first, we need to prepare our meshes and we need to prepare an account with Mixamo. If I take a look here inside my 3D space, I've been working with some models that were photo scans from Sketchfab, CC BY, and I've been working with some of my other characters that I used in the previous videos for scale. And I've been using, with that, I've been splicing, cutting and chopping up and recreating some of the meshes from these characters and putting it together to make a new character. So let me just compile the shaders. So this character in the center, her name is Kristen. The video is not about her exactly in the next video, but she is one of the characters of the neighborhood. She is a worker inside of downtown. She entertains, she sells, and she works for the clubs in that particular area, which is a central part of the city's hedonistic center close to the spaceport. So she's a particular character. She likes to be strong and independent and wants to get away from there, but unfortunately she is a little bit, I guess you could say, indentured or enslaved to the industry there, and it's pretty hard and expensive to get off planet or to another city, so she's stuck. But that doesn't stop her. So with that, we're going to have to rig her in record time. So as you can see, she is a character with quite long legs compared to, this was the style that I wanted to work with. Extra long legs, very short bodies, extra long arms. And I've used that proportions with my rigs, and I have on the left a control rig on Gale Linux, and on the right I have a Mixamo rig with the deform controls with no hands at the moment on Dev. So Dev was on episode 1 and Gabronix was on episode 2 or 3. 2, episode 2. And also episode 3. So now we have this new character. So let's start with the beginning. And the beginning is we need a Mixamo character rig. This gives us a base mesh. So this Lola B Stike Peak, yep, I'll use this character. This Lola B Stiperic, sorry, is a character that has long legs. Let's use it. And it's still loading. Why hasn't it loaded? Just refresh the page. So here, when you create an account with Adobe, you have access to the Mixamo.com website. And this particular website gives you multiple characters that you can play with. And it's very good because they all have a very similar rig, remapped and targeted to a character. And it's super useful. So what we're going to do is we're going to load a character which has relatively long legs, close to similar proportions to your original character, so that the remapping or retargeting work is not required. And we're just going to download the FBX. In the T-pose, FBX binary, and we'll download. Alright, so here inside my rigs folder, I have a folder called Mixamo, and I'm just going to save her to this folder. So once we have the base rig, we're inside here, and we can load this base rig into this particular scene. So with that, we're going to import the FBX from the folder we downloaded, and we're going to use this as the guide rig and also as the shadow rig. So let me explain the steps basically. So the first step is we need to have a guide rig, and the guide rig is basically some deform bones. And these bones are basically the default Mixamo rig. So the Mixamo rig is also the same as our mocap rig, or the Mixamo rig. It's a very minimal rig that we can use to create animations based from motion capture. This could be from any software, and these things usually are, all of the bones have no controls. It's just FK and basic hierarchy and some naming conventions for the actual motion capture system that they use, or whatever one you want to use. So this is your guide rig, and this is your deform bone rig, and at the end of the day, this is the same thing as a shadow rig. I like shadow rig because it sounds very mysterious. So with that, that's the first step. We need to get our guide rig, or our rig. So this guide rig is basically the same as everything else, and we can use this equally for deform bones for the mesh, the mocap rig for the motion capture, and the shadow rig that we can use to re-export or use as the basis deformation for the actual character. So that's the first step. The second step is we need to create the control rig. So the control rig is basically the idea where we have a system to animate everything. We can have IK, FK, switches, synoptics, we could have constraints, we could have the spine control, we could have foot roll controls, and all these different types of controls. And to do that, we're going to use the Mixamo add-on, which you can get for free. So let's load her rig up, and we'll import. Just default settings, should work. And here she is. Just let the shaders compile for a second. There it is. Very similar shape, and with that we can just delete her body because we don't actually need it. And now we can work with the viewport display. Turn inside the viewport display panel in the armature settings, turn it on in front. So if we go into the front view, now this is our guide rig, and this rig here, we can start to use the circle select and then transform. and use the transform controls to line up where her shoulder and her wrists and things are. You have to keep in mind that Mixamo rigs do not have symmetry, so you're going to have to manually work the symmetry, which is not perfect, unfortunately, but this is important. This is just something that needs to be done. So because we start lining up the guide rig, we could use this to help us generate the control rig. So these bones here are the clavicles, here is the shoulder, then we go into the elbow, which we can pull back a bit. In this case, we could like forwards and backwards movements. Sometimes if we select them on both sides, we can get similar symmetry, frontwards, backwards, top and bottom. The only problem is we can't have exact symmetry in and out, unless maybe we switch to local transform. No. Normal? Let's try normal. Yeah, there we go. Normal transform helps us to get us in and out. Or global back to global. So you can switch between normal and global transforms to kind of get a general idea of where you want to move things, because the bones will be flipped accordingly. Unless normal individual regions, yeah. So basically you line up your guide rig, and these bones, all of these bones are the same bones that the motion capture will use on the actual characters. And this would be perfect once you set up your weights of your character. These bones are the same ones that will be actually moving the character inside the motion capture. So let's keep it to global, keep it together. Basically, you gotta have a movement of your bones, or the points, in a similar position. So you have the toe, you have the foot roll, you have the ankle, you have the thigh bone, then you have the leg bone, the leg bone first and then the thigh bone at the center of the knee. The ankle is usually at the ankle pivot. This here is usually at the center of the foot, around here where it bends. And then you have your toe. And the hips, she's got pretty wide hips. The spine, you gotta, let's just hide the other characters that I used as references. You don't actually need them anymore. Oh, what happened to the dress? Maybe I have it in the wrong layer. Yes, I have it in the wrong layer. Just move it up to the right layer. Okay, and hide, where's this character from? We'll hide this one. Okay, good. So that's a bit easier. So now the spine part, I like to generally put a little bit of curve into the spine. But once you're okay, you're good. You got the neck. You line up the neck into the center of the neck, similar to where the bone would be. You could also do the same for the head, like this. We'll do it without hair for now. This is usually the top of the head. Oh wait, let me just confirm. If you want to see the names of the bones, you can turn on the show names inside the viewport display of the armature settings. So you can actually have a better idea of where things should be. So here the spine is actually the base of the neck, and this is actually the neck. So move it down, move this down here, and this head, and then we have the right eye, left eye, which I won't actually use. The top of the head, you can actually delete bones, that's no problem. And once you're ready with that, the top of the head at the end, this is for just weighting purposes, mostly. And the eyeball, just roughly. And usually good. So sometimes I like to delete the fingers sometimes, just to keep my life simple. But in this case, I may need to use her fingers or her hands to actually do the work. So I'm going to keep her hands on. but I may actually have another rig for this for later. So you can be modular, you can not, but I'll keep them in for now for the purpose of this demonstration. And now we have the first step done. If we do a binding of this rig, like here, just the material. So if we have this rig here, I'm going to just use the random material stuff here. The dress I will rig later. And this I don't need either. So if I have this character here and I want to bind her to this mesh, all I have to do is I click on the mesh first and then shift click and select the rig, Control P, or go to Object, Parent. Then you can choose the one with envelope weights, or automatic weights, sorry, with automatic weights. This will give you a rough rig, which now we can use to pose. So if we go into the pose mode, which in Boi Addons is Shift 2, in Blender you have to assign a hotkey or use the pie menu. The pie menu is just Control Tab usually, then to the right. So you're in pose mode, and now you can actually pose the character, and it's good to go. Alright, so now the next step. Control Rig, and then Animations. So because we're using a mocap rig, this can jump the step of a control rig because we don't need to do animation, and we can immediately use animations from Mixamo. So this is the easy step. So for example, we switch over, instead of our characters, we go to animations with the characters selected, and we can choose an animation that I need to, for example, what would she be doing? She could be partying or dancing. So let's try dancing. So salsa, silly, hip hop dancing, jazz dancing, salsa. Something a bit more party-ish, jazz dancing, hip-hop. I like this hip-hop dancing where she's just spinning around, that's kind of cool. So let's use this one. So you click on it, you load it, you can download them all if you want. And basically, did it work? It's maybe because I'm in Firefox. But you just click download. 30 frames per second, which is fine. In this case, I want it without the skin. I want no keyframe reduction, and I just want the bones. I just want the animation. So I'm going to download. This will give me another FBX, but without the skin, because that will just keep the size smaller. So go inside animations. I'm going to call this F hip hop dancing, F for female. I'm going to save it. And inside my scene, I'm going to import the FBX, the one I just saved, F hip hop dancing. As you can see, it's still a relatively large file. I'll import because it's a large animation. And now we have F hip hop dancing rig inside the scene, and I'll just move it to the side here so you can see. So if we press play, I'm at frame 1000, so let me just go to frame 0. So if I press play, you can see that the rig is already moving. One of them is static and the other one is moving. Let me just hide this character and this character. There we go. The playback's a bit better. Woohoo, much better. So now that we have one character doing the crazy dancing in the spot there, that's great. So how do we add this to the rig that we just created? So we go into our animation layout, and you can see all the motion capture keyframes. Everything, all the way up to frame nearly 500. So we go into the dope sheet, we go into the action editor, and inside the action editor we have this gobbledygook. And in the gobbledygook, we're just going to call this F hip hop dancing file, and we'll just call it 01. It's the first version, and this is for the animation. So I'm going to put another word anim in front of it as well. I'm I'm going to hit the little shield icon to save it inside the file so that I can actually, now that it's inside the file, I can delete this rig without a problem and it will save. And now if I'm inside this rig here, I can select it. I can pick and choose the F Anim Hip Hop Dancing. And now if we delete the other rig and hide the controls, so get rid of the names. Oh no, it's not doing the armature name, so I'll have to fix that feature inside Boi Addons. So just turn off the names, there we go. So if I press play and hide the boots because we don't need it, there she is, she's dancing around. Just like, so any customization that I did to the character with the painterly, she's moving around and doing her crazy dance. So let's take a look at our diagram again. We just created a guide rig, which is the same as the deform bones, which is the same as the mocap rig, which is the same as our shadow rig. And with that, we're using the free animations from Mixamo, the animation clips from the mocap, and we applied it to the mocap rig so that we're driving all of these deform bones for the skin, and we're driving the guide rig for our control rig. And it's also helps us to create this shadow rig. So that's great. So let's move on to the next step, control rig. So now that we have this character, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to remove the animation. I'm going to select all the bones and just hit clear. Pose, clear transforms, clear user transforms, or all, clear all, or clear location rotation and then scale. So I'll just click on clear all and it just resets all the animation on this particular character. And she's back to normal. Great, ready to work. So now if we take a look at the website of Mixamo, I'm just going to click up here and open onto the home page. Account info, blog, learn, support, forum. Where would I download the webpage? Okay, we'll do a quick search. Mixamo Blender add-on. So the Mixamo and Blender, there's also Blender Nation article on it. It loads up this web page from the substance3d.adobe.com website, plugins/Mixamo in Blender, separated by hyphens. You can get the add-on. And this will create this add-on that will give you a basic idea of like generating a control rig. Unfortunately for Blender 3.4 and 3.5, which just came out last week, inside the master, the add-on will break. But it is useful for one thing, and one thing only, control rigs. And this creates actually a pretty decent control rig. So I'm just going to save the scene just in case. And I'm going to also, it's a heavy scene because of all the photo scans. Do not save your photo scans. Usually I clean my scenes up after modeling, but I haven't done that yet. So I'm just going to duplicate this, and I'm going to name one of them as the deform rig. And the other one, I'm going to call this as the guide rig. So let's take a look at the add-on. Let's see if I have it installed. I do. So I'm going to select the rig. And underneath my animation, I've changed it. You should see a panel inside the tab Mixamo, but I've changed it to another tab. Let's zoom in so you can see. I have this character called the deform rig. I can select the guide rig. Now I have the guide rig selected, and I have two things. Create a control rig, and that's all I need. The animation system here I found a little bit buggy, and you can update your rigs as well. So I'm just going to create a control rig. I'm going to want IK arms, IK legs, and I don't want the animation. It's created an error. That's okay. Don't be afraid. That's all we need for now. The bugs is basically because the rig didn't actually generate correctly. or the visibility of the rig. So if we take a closer look, I'm going to hide the deform rig, and now with the guide rig you can see that I have, let's just see if I have my bone layers add-on. Bone Manager. I highly recommend the Bone Manager add-on. This was recommended me by Gladnock's last class. But the Bone Manager add-on basically gives us the same skeleton layers, but with names and a better controls. So that's kind of nice. We can add filters and things like that. Toggle deformations on all the layers as well. So for example, this layer here, this layer is, let's just double check to see if this is these are not deformed bones. So these are just called the IK bones. And now let's go back to the other layer, this layer here. These are the deform bones. So that's important to keep in mind. And the last layer here, these are the control bones. So everything else is not important. Whoops. And we're good to go. So we can show the IK bones, the deform bones, and the control bones. So now that we have control bones that we can isolate like this, if we move, for example, the head, it's going to move the head. If we move the arm, which is in IK mode, it moves the arm. Nice and perfect. The really cool stuff is like this foot control. So now we have foot roll like this, which is really nice. And now we have our deform rig and we have our guide rig, and everything is good to go. Technically. The only problem is the guide rig, if we go into animation and we load the same animation, guess what happens? If I press play, nothing happens. Okay, there's the problem. That's the first problem that we have. When we create a guide rig, we have the deform bones and it works with animation clips perfectly. But if we generate a control rig from the Mixamo add-on, we cannot apply animation very easily. So what I'm going to do is in the deform rig, I'm just going to duplicate it. I'm going to apply an animation like this and select the control rig, go back to the animation add-on. I'm going to select the rig with the animation and I'm going to hit apply animation to control rig. Will it work? Oh, I did. Oh, there we go. Didn't crash this time. Nice. Maybe because I haven't edited the rig. Okay, well, you can apply animations the easy way this way. But what happens if, for example, there's something that I like about the animation and something I don't like? So this is where we need to think about mocap rigs and animation clips. Animation clips are full body. Alright? So full body animation clips means it animates the head, animates the legs, animates the torso, and everything else. So a shadow rig can also work with animation clips, but this could be selective. So selective animation. So what we're going to do is we're going to add the guide rig or the deform bones to the control rig, which we already have. And we're going to create a system where we can create selective animation between the mocap and personalized animation without the need of using animation layers. So for example, let's take a look at this animation. I love the way that she's moving her body and her legs and spinning around, but I want her arms to do something different. I want her arms to not move. I want to animate the arms holding a cup or a bottle or a nice cocktail, and I want the other arm to be pointing up and down, dancing with the music instead of spinning around like this. So this is where we need to create a shadow rig, which will give us the ability to blend or choose if the arms have animation from the actual motion capture or animation from a personalized control rig animation. So let's just, I'm going to save this as anim. We'll make this the control anim F hip hop dance because it converted the animation to the new rig. Save it, remove it, go back to the bones, select everything, and reset. So now let's think about this a little bit. If you remember correctly, we have deform bones and control bones. So we have these deform bones, and we also have our friend here, the original deform bone rig with the actual bones attached to everything. So now we need to think about how do we create a shadow. So if you think about what is a shadow is basically you have original object, then you have a light, the light hits the object and casts a shadow. When you move the original object, it moves the shadow. So the shadow is kind of like a copy, yeah, I guess you could say a copy or a mirage of the original rig. And to do that, we're going to use constraints. And we're going to have to change the names of different things. So this guide rig works with any animation clip that we download. This control rig works with any animation that we download, but we have to recreate the animations using the add-ons, which cannot be trusted sometimes. Sometimes if you edit the rig, it will break. So in this case, so for example, if I change these hands rigs and the eye rigs with my own custom hands, which has like IK and FK and everything, it may break. So I'm going to use my custom control rig with the original shadow rig. And to do that, I'm just going to change the visibility of one of these rigs and go into wireframe mode. I'm going to go here, go inside the viewport display of the armature, viewport display of the armature. I'm going to make one of them bounding bones, like this. And I'm going to, I'm in edit mode, bone envelopes, just make it a little bit fatter like this, so it's easier to see. Turn on the names, and we're going to focus on one arm, the left arm. So we have two bones here, this one, and the shoulder and the hand. So I'm going to select these bones like this, inverse the selection, hide everything else, and also move these bones to a new layer. I'm going to move it to the bottom layer. So now I can just see those bones in an isolated way. Oops, where is it? Where'd they go? Did I delete by accident? Oh, maybe I have to use the moving on the actual... There we go. So now if I take... Oh, that's protected layers. There we go. So now I have these bones here. If we take a look underneath, I'm going to only show the deform bones, which is going to be my parents, for the sake of the purpose. And I'm going to show the names as well, without the names. And basically, what I'm going to do is I'm going to constrain the deform bone of the actual rig to my driving bone, so that I could create this constraint. So as you can see, we have a couple constraints here. But I'm going to add another constraint. If we take a look here in the options, we have add constraint with target, with targets. So I'm going to select the bone beneath first, no, the bone at the top, the green one, which is from my control rig. Put it down to the bone below, which is my deform rig, or the guide rig. And add a constraint with a target. And I'm going to copy transforms. And something weird happened. So in this case, I'm going to copy local space, and I'm going to add it to local space. Okay. And I'm going to have it after the original with full, I think it is, or split channels. So just make sure everything's okay. Everything's not okay. Pose space? It's a pose space? Yeah, nope, it's not pose space. Local with parent may work. Okay, so if I move this bone, hey, it's not working. Okay, let's unhide the control rig. So if I move this bone here, this bone here, as you can see, it's moving the bone beneath it. There we go. Local with parent. Local should work sometimes, but I think I needed the parental offsets. So if you take a look, I mean, obviously the deformed bones from underneath are kind of working, but I kind of want the original rig. So let's take a look at this. You can see that when I move the arm, it's moving the control rig, which is the triangular bones, and the square bones of the deformed rig with the skin is moving with it. That's exactly what I wanted. So now let's do the same with this bone, just these two bones, so we have a general idea. Inside of the settings here, add constraint with target, copy transforms, go inside the bone settings, back to local with parent, after the original full, or after the original split channels. Not sure what the difference is really. Let's take a quick test just to make sure to see if my binding is working. Kind of not. So let's just put this to local space, back to local space. There we go. Good enough for now. So now we've attached bones, and now I have an option of okay. Let's do a quick little test and see what's happening. So basically, what I'm doing is I'm creating an attachment. You can see that the control rig is made of three layers. The first layer is, for example, the controls. The second layer is the deformed bones. And the other layer is like your nulls, which are your empty, what I call nulls, or the bones that you don't see, that you don't animate, but help you control the rig. So these are my null bones. They're usually hidden, and they're just there for like controls. So with this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to bind the shadow rig to the other deform rig so that I can use the original animation without a problem. And I will have an on-off slider between the binding of the shadow rig to the deform rig so that I have some control. So as you can see, if I go back to my deform rig, which is here, and I load the animation for the hip hop dancing, she's going to be moving around and everything's perfectly fine. But in this case, what I can do is, something's weird's happening. These are still, okay, maybe it's the wrong constraint, copy transforms. So replace maybe is correct. So I'm just going to turn on replace instead of after, because then there's no blend. So now if we press play, look at that. So now her arm is held still compared to the control rig, but it's still animating. So now if I use this control rig, I can use it as an offset system to control the custom animation between the mocap data, which obviously I'll have to animate that turning around, but I can use the control rig to drive the original puppet. So I have a master control and a puppet with the motion capture, and I can pick and choose which parts have the animation and which parts don't. So let's go back to the original rig, remove the animation, and select all the bones again and just reset the pose. Back into pose mode, reset. Alright, back into normal position. And the other one as well, back to the normal position. So, you're wondering now, okay, so this is cool. You have a Mixamo Rig, super easy, where I can download any animation from the website for free. All of the animations for free, or I could use another software which generates artificial intelligence-based animations from webcam footage, which you can generate 30 seconds of webcam footage for free if you want. Or you can use any other motion capture system with like a Rococo suit or any kind of work like this. Let me just give you that mocap website actually. I haven't actually tried it, but it also gives you these cool rigs. Plask. Plask.ai. So Plask is a really interesting solution. But either way, you can use mocap and you can create a control rig. If the add-on gives you the ability to generate a control rig, you can. Or if you can use any generation if you want. And after that, you bind your bones to the control rig. So you bind your Mixamo bones, the deformed bones here, onto the square bones onto the triangle bones, which is your control rig. So what happens if you want to turn it on or off? In this case, you can also use world space. Boom, world space to movement. But in this case, local with parent. Yeah, you can't. As you can see, the control rig is not identical. So I'm using local space and use a pretend replacement. Okay, so in this case, we can create a new rig. Inside of the control rig, for example, we can create this bone here inside edit mode. Just move it to the side here. I'm going to rename this as a control arm, like this. And inside the control arm, I'm going to use this as a position in 0 in pose space. As you can see, everything's at 0. And I'm going to use this as a driver in the Y direction, in the Y direction, to drive the constraints. So what I need to do is I need to go to my arm bone, which has this copy transform or child of. Both of those could work. And I'm going to control the influence, this influence down here, with the transform of this bone up here. So I'm going to copy the location, right click on it, copy as a new driver, go to the bone, paste in the influence, right click, paste driver. Okay, so now it is off. And I'm going to do the same with the other bone, paste as driver. So now we have this bone here. When I move it to, I just need to make sure. Let's go to edit driver. Down below here. Go into my driver editor. And here on the right, inside the driver editor, function curve editor, underneath the driver's mode, you can now check and see the properties of that particular driver down here. So those properties down here, in this case, right now it says averaged value, and this means when I move this bone to 1 meter, it will turn on the driver to the value of 1. It's exactly the same. Equals, it means the same thing. That's the average value. So if we change it to a scripted expression, I could say the location value of 0.1, so that means 1/10. So I'm going to divide into 10, will mean the influence of 1. So if I move this bone up to 0.1 meter or 10 centimeters like this, I'm going to look at the constraint on the square bone. It is now at 0.1. So it's still the same. Oh, sorry, it's the wrong bone. It's at 0.01. So in this case, we want to multiply by 10. Sorry about that. So now it is at a value of 1. So this particular driver, we can copy and paste it or just edit the same driver to a scripted expression, location divided times 10, so that we only have to move it 10 centimeters to turn on and turn off. For a switch, you can also limit your location like this. And I want a maximum of a maximum Y of 0.1, and I'm going to use local space. So now we have a switch. We move the switch up to 1, down, off, up, on, down, off. So if we turn it on, say that again.
Wouldn't just a custom property be better than having a phone to switch it off and on?
No, because then I'd have to have the editor properties panel open all the time. If I have it on a rig, it's like a guided user interface inside the 3D viewport. So it's better to create your synoptics and your controls directly in the 3D viewport because it's easier to use, because 1, Blender doesn't have synoptics. 2, the panels, this panel thing, look at all these tabs that I have here and all these different tabs, things that I can use. This properties panel, you can use it in custom property here somewhere, but you're going to have to dig it or pin it.
I think it's under item or something.
It would be underneath the item tab, yeah.
If you had any, otherwise it would show up. Right?
Yeah, and you'd have to create either an object property, custom property, new, blah, 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 and you'll still have to create your drivers anyway. So you could create like an actual visual switch with like a title, a number, an image. You could use a little box. You can create an actual visual slider, and it'll be easier to animate. So when you press I and hit animate, or if you just it's a transform control instead of a custom property control. So it's easier to animate or keyframe. You can like keyframe the whole character, and you'll be keyframing custom properties as well.
If I'm getting this right, you are using one rig to control another rig?
Pretty much. That's what a shadow rig is.
Very, very convenient.
Yeah, so now that I have...
You don't have to redo any of your wastes or anything. You have multiple rigs.
I could have multiple rigs based on one control rig.
Doing anything.
Exactly. So now that we have that, now that we have the shadow rig created, if we go back to the animation clip editor, the action editor, back into the hip hop dancing mode, now if we take a look at this control and we press play, notice, and I move this upwards, her arm is no longer moving anymore. Move it downwards, it's moving again. Move it upwards, the arm is static now. Move it downwards, it's moving again. So I just managed to bind the animation of the deform rig without needing to recalculate and rebake to the control rig. And I can use a custom control rig to now animate whatever I want. So I'm going to raise her hand like this, nice and still, turn it on like this, and there it is. She's holding her hand high in the sky as she's spinning around. And I can turn it off whenever I want as an animation keyframe to go back to the mocap information. So let's just loop it a bit better at 420. There we go, so she's moving, everything's fine. Let's actually turn off this visibility here. Viewport display, amateur, no names. Right, so the control rig, she's moving around. Move it down to the, move it up, turn it on. Her arm is static. So now I can control the animation based on the mocap, and later then I can do the animation of the control rig however I want. So for example, let's do this. So at this frame here, her hand is going to be up like this, hit keyframe, and then she's going to move her hand down like this, hit keyframe, and then move it up again, hit keyframe, and then I'm going to use the control here, keyframe the control, and then I'm going to put it back down to normal movement at this keyframe here. So I blended between the mocap information and the custom animation, and then I'm going to hold it down and then turn it off at this point so it's back to the normal custom keyframe. So if we go back to the beginning, she's animating normally, turns on, custom keyframes, turns off, back to the normal mocap. Let's look at that again without the animation. Ignore the face. So back here, normal animation turns on, animation turns off. And with that, and I can also I can do a blend as well. So for example, I could do corrective animation by using a 50% blend. So instead of 1%, I can move it to like 0.5%. So just a little bit on, hit keyframe. And so that I can do also not turn it full percent on. And in this case, for example, instead of moving the arm up, I want to move the arm down just a little bit, like this. Oh, so I don't have auto keyframe turned on. So let's just move the arm down like this. And I can offset the mocap information without using animation layers. I don't need to use the NLA either. I can store the information inside of a separate track or in a separate control rig without a problem. So now that we have that done, if we press play, hide the information stuff. There. Well, obviously it's not the best. You're going to have to be a lot more careful, but yeah, she just moved her arm downwards. Woo, woo, with a custom animation. And down, and up again. Obviously you're going to have to improve the shoulder rig a little bit better or how you animate that. So you can, that's one way of creating a new system of using mocap without needing to rebake, using a Mixamo control rig, and you can bind your bones. If you're super into technical direction, you can create a script to help you bind your bones automatically, or you can build your rig with the based on the Mixamo rig with your own custom controls and just use a copy and paste. There are many things you can do, but the basics ideas is that we go back, we bind a shadow deform rig or the guide rig to a new control rig so that we can have an on-off controls to use the mocap animation clip with selective animation. So the shadow rig gives us the ability to use selective mocap animation and the ability to use a control rig for custom animation. And this is the basics of using a shadow rig. At the end of the day, you can bake your shadow rig down with the new animation and export your custom shadow rig nice and easy to FBX and export to a game engine without needing to export only deform bones or whatever, and you can use this to personalize your animation. So that's what a shadow rig is, and that's what I wanted to share with you today. Do you have questions? Let's just take a look.
I just got here. Can you repeat everything?
Yeah. All right, so these.
Just kidding.
Oh, that's good. Well, basically, at the beginning, I was explaining that you can use Mixamo, and I showed quickly how to use a guide rig from Mixamo to rig your own character inside of Blender, because sometimes the reason to do this is sometimes inside of Mixamo the weighting is not very good, or sometimes your character positions or proportions or clothes or model has changed and you don't want to regenerate the automatic rig from Mixamo. So you could do that inside Blender. You're just downloading the rig and repositioning it a little bit to something with similar proportions. And then I showed quickly how to use the two methods of creating a control rig or just using the default rig from Mixamo to add your own animations. The add-on sometimes works, sometimes doesn't. Today it actually worked. And with that, we baked the animation from a reference armature to a new control rig generated by Mixamo here in the Mixamo control rig add-on. And then from there, I did a basic introduction of how to create a shadow rig so that you don't have to always bake your animations and create your own custom control rig and then just bind your deformed bones to the control rig. You can do it inside the same armature, which is more performant, or you can do it between two armatures just to keep it nice and simple and easy. And you can do that for retargeting or whatever. And then I showed how to create a quick little driver-based switch so that you can use custom animation between your rigs. And that was it today. I hope that summary sums it up for you. And Marty, I hope it helps you as well. And I hope it was interesting. Let me just check to see if on Twitch there is any questions.
I found it very interesting, and thank you for doing it.
Pleasure's always mine, and I'm happy you liked it. Looks like there's no one in the chat. That's okay. So do you have questions, or would you like me to go a bit deeper? I think my time is up soon, but I can finish in the next, I can answer something in the next 5 minutes. I guess that's it really. Just a word. Oh, cool. I'm glad you like it, Blockchain Chad. I just saw your message in Twitch. Excellent. I'm happy. Glad you like it. Just a word of warning concerning constraints. Blender typically animates exclusively in world space, but with bones, they are exclusive to local space. So your keyframes inside your bones is a local space movement. So for example, the rotation is based on a local space quaternion or Euler movement, and the scale is local, and generally your bones are animated in this particular case. But its transformations are in world space. So you move it, and then I move it up again, it's in world space. So location is world space, rotation is local space, and scale is local space. Which means when you create when you create the child of movement or copy location and rotation, if you look at the deform rig constraints, it gives you these options of targeting your local space or targeting the world space. In this case, when you change from local space to world space, it means an orientation to which reference. So local space means copy the local space transformations, which means if I move one bone in the X movement and the other bone is rotated 90 degrees, one will go to the right and the other one will go to the top because of the location of that's local space. The local space means the local transformations or the local movement. So as you can see, when I move one bone up, like, okay, let's just turn on the switches like this. So if I move one bone up this way, is it off or on? Let's move it, turn it on. Yeah, why is it not working anymore? Oh, it's the other bones. There we go. So as you can see, oh, that's because she's spinning around. If we move one bone up, it's moving the other bone up. But if I rotate this bone, or since it's stuck on replacement, so you can see that if I move it to the right, because of the bone is twisted around, it's moving to the left. This is local space. But if I change this to the owner is, I'm just going to take the world space movement. Sorry, let's keep it on local space and get the world space movement. Now, if I move this to the right, it's going to move the local space of the right of that bone. So you can see that the orientation is like completely weird. So you got to keep that in mind, that even though the transform panels in Blender do not show the difference between world space and local space, you do have this power inside the constraints to know which space do I get it from. Do I take the world orientation or the local orientation? Do I take the local orientation with its parent offset? Do I take the pose space, which means the movement that's happening inside the animation? It's a little bit different. Which, as you can see in the tooltip, it says the object transformation is ignored. So if I rotated the whole entire rig in a different part of the world and it's affecting everything, it won't take that world object orientation and just use the bone orientation. So it's a pretty good one. Pose space is very good for armatures. And you have your world space, obviously, which is good for different types of constraints. But you need to master that because Blender is not obvious. There's no GUI to tell you what is local space and world space inside of the animations. And the keyframes also doesn't tell you what space they're animating in. But typically, location, location, location is done in world space. Rotation and scale is done in local space when it comes to armatures, typically. And the world space as well is relative to the object position. So it's usually, that's what they call pose space. So it takes a little bit of getting a hang on of the transformations, and that's why everybody hates rigging inside Blender, is because it's not clear what is world space and local space. But with that, that's just a little tip, a word of warning, and if things get a little bit difficult, well, you can always ping me here in the Q&A, and we can always take a look at these difficulties that you may be having, and I will research and create a presentation for you so that it will help you every Friday. So with that, thank you, and I hope to see you next week, same time, same place.